The game we're about to see blew my mind the first time I saw it. And the reason is, it's not only a beautiful game, which it definitely is, but it's also the fact that Anand had everything worked out till the very last move. And we're gonna see it's not a particularly short game, so as to have everything worked out till the very end, but Anand knew every single move from his home preparation, which just goes to show how deep these guys prepare. And this was 1993, just the start of the computer era, which makes it even more impressive. The game is Anand-Ivanchuk from the Super Tournament of Linares 1993. So let's go right into it. So the game started with a Petrov defense. This is the one, it's the Petrov or Russian defense. It's a counterattack on the e4 pawn. At the time it was thought to be, it was used as a drawing tool for black. And in the hands of Kravnik and Leko, it was a very solid opening choice for black. And we're going to go through the opening phase quite quickly, because we want to get to the point where Anand gets his nice prep in. Well, everyone gets their outpost. They're both occupying the outpost with the knights, and it's very typical that we're going to challenge them. And knight d7 played to challenge the knight on e5, and we already have a knight on the knight on e4, of course. So white takes, bishop takes d7, white castles, and Ivanchuk plays a very enterprising move, this queen h4, which is very sharp. Black is really trying to attack on the king side, and it could become dangerous if we don't do anything about it, like the two bishops aiming there. The knight on e4 is quite a threatening piece already. There's this queen on h4 that's already taking a look at some sensitive points in our position. So Anand reacts quite well. While the king is still in the center, he undermines the knight on e4 and he attacks d5. So Ivanchuk castles queenside immediately. And Anand plays this very good move, c5, that basically rules out bishop d6 and at the same time establishes a space advantage on the queen side, which will enable him to attack on that wing. So black plays g5. He's just throwing everything at us, and this also enables bishop g7, which will attack that pawn d4, which is admittedly a little hard to defend because we don't have pawns that can defend it any longer. So knight c3, of course, we continue with the strategy of developing our pieces and also challenging the knight on e4, of course. Bishop g7, attacking d4, and now white makes a move that he wouldn't normally make because it's really weakening, and we don't even have the light square bishop on g2 or close enough to defend all the weaknesses on light squares. But the thing is, there's a pawn that's falling here because the queen moves, has to stay around here, and now knight takes e4, and Anand wins the pawn, at least temporarily. But black plays bishop b5, and this had been played before. This wasn't a new position at all. And white used to take on g5, and after rook takes d4, the game becomes quite messy. That was the opening theory back then. But then Anand comes up with his new idea, bishop g2, attacking the queen. For the time being, he's up a pawn. He has won a pawn on d5. Black hasn't recorded the pawn on d4, but it's hard to defend this, isn't it? Like, it's the rook on f1 is hanging. The pawn is also under attack. Black just goes back to f5, defends g5, and it seems like this pawn is already quite hopeless. We will have to play rook to e1, but black definitely gets an initiative here. He just takes the pawn on d4, and look at those pieces. Or even bishop takes d4 could be a thing. But Anand comes up with a very nice conception. He plays bishop e3, just completely ignoring his rook on f1. He's going to sacrifice the exchange, because that will stop black's ideas for an attack on the king side. It's hardly likely that he'll attack without the light square bishop. And it will give white a free hand to attack on the queen side. So we talked about this concept in a previous video, which you can see here. We're talking about concentration of forces. We make a small sacrifice, well, rather small, it's an exchange, and we still have a pawn for it. We'll get a bishop and a pawn for the rook we're sacrificing here. but that enables us to take the pieces quickly to the vicinity of the opponent's king. And we've seen this with pawn sacrifices, but now it's an entire exchange, though white is going to get awesome counterplay for it. So quite a deep idea. After bishop takes f1, bishop takes f1, and white is simply going queen a4, and it's very hard to defend the queen side for black, quite surprisingly. So rook h e8 was tried, and there were some tactics, of course, to work out, because the pin on the pawn d4 looks kind of critical. But what about bishop takes d4? Let's see if this works. Bishop takes d4. Black sacrifices the piece. It seems like he's getting it back immediately after something like queen e4 attacking the bishop, because the bishop is not supposed to move. Our queen will be hanging. But as it turns out, when you're going to sacrifice a piece like this and try to get it back with some order like this, where you see that the queen is hanging, you have to do the math, because your opponent might just be getting too many pieces for the queen. That's exactly what happens here. After bishop takes h8, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, white has two bishops and a rook for that queen, which is winning for white. It's just too much material. So black couldn't really do this. After bishop takes d4, unfortunately for him, this rook is hanging on h8, so he doesn't have the time to attack our bishop. We just take all his pieces. Granted, he gets the queen, but we get all the rest of the pieces. So black plays rook h e8 first. And now this might well be a threat, because after bishop takes d4, he may attack the bishop on d4, and we don't have the same resource anymore. There's no rook hanging on h8. So Anand goes for the attack immediately. He plays queen a4, attacking a7, and bringing the most important pieces in an attack. Quite close already. King b8, basically the only move to defend that pawn. And rook d1, which defends d4. And you're going to see what Anand's idea was. We're move 18, and this is still home preparation. And it's not only about defending the pawn. As we're going to see, white may push c6 at any point, so black has to be careful with that, and at some point he will have to play c6, which he does right now. And now the other idea, rook d3, an amazing rook lift. The rook, to get involved in the attack, sometimes has to do that, just take the lift and get in front of its own pawns. Because we can't really get open files due to these two pawns being in the way. If we put a rook on b1, it's useless, of course. On a1, it doesn't do anything. But we can use the rook lift to get it involved in the attack directly, just in a few moves. And that's going to overpower this poor king, which doesn't have any pieces around. And it's largely due to this pawn. That pawn is just cutting the board in two halves. Unfortunately for black, he can't get the queen involved in the defense. And things get very hard now. It's not that black is losing, but he has to be extremely careful and accurate not to even lose immediately. He plays queen e4, which is good because it keeps some pressure on d4, it keeps the queen around, defends c6. Rook a3, which makes black weaken himself by means of a6. Bishop d3, and this was a key moment. Here, Ivanchuk makes a completely understandable mistake. I mean, imagine being in this situation where you don't really know what's going on in terms of preparation. I mean, he was out of book, and Anand had everything worked out, and he knew every line here. Apparently, the only way to survive here was queen d5, but it's the reason is very, very deep. It keeps this pawn defended in some long computer line, which Anand, of course, knew. And he had a plan against it, we're going to see. But let's see what happened in the game. He played queen g4, which, well, has the problem that even if it's still eyeing this pawn, doesn't defend c6. So Anand goes for it immediately. Rook b3, which puts these pawns in crisis. And b7 is pinned. So we threaten bishop takes a6 or queen takes c6. At some point, even rook takes b7 and queen takes a6. Maybe not now. But yeah, too many threats to deal with, unfortunately. Well, black tried bishop takes d4. And now the first impressive sacrifice of the last part of the game, of the definition. Rook takes b7 check, completely exposing the king. And now it works, and we're going to see why. King takes b7, queen takes a6 check, king b8. And the problem is that the king can't really run away. If you go king c7, this bishop will help. We just give the check with the queen. The pawn is still doing a great job not allowing the king to escape. And if king c8, there's checkmate with bishop a6. So that king is really going nowhere after queen takes a6. At least it can't escape to the center. And if he goes king b8, we still need to find a way to finish him off. At least we have a perpetual, and we can even take the pawn on c6 with check and continue checking, but we have more. Check, king a8, queen takes c6 check, king b8. We could do this forever. But after queen b6 check, well, the first thing to notice is that if he wants to escape to the center, we have the check on a6, king d7, and again this pawn proves itself to be a great asset. We play queen d6 with checkmate, and there's nothing black can do. And again, this pawn plays a big role in the attack. And if he goes to a8, which is the main idea to defend, Anand knew this move from his home prep. And we're talking about move 28, which is still, I'm still amazed. What can I say about it? He's down, well, he's 2 rooks. He only has a bishop to show for it. But that king is in the corner. The queen is controlling every square around it. And kings in the corner are usually a problem. We have the appropriate piece to take advantage of this. Ivanchuk faces bishop b5. And he resigns. There's absolutely nothing that black can do against bishop c6 with checkmate. You can give away a lot of pieces. You don't even have checks as black. You give a check on d1, well, that's it. We have king g2. So not much is going on there. And if rook c8, which looks like the only way to try to defend, there's bishop c6 check. And it's very pretty because this rook will also be compromised. After rook takes c6, queen takes c6 check, fork, king a7, queen takes e8. Well, white got 3 extra pawns out of this. He took both of black's rooks, and now it's completely hopeless for him. So yeah, he resigned after bishop b5. Well, quite an amazing piece of home preparation by Anand. It was very, very deep. Well, there was a fighting chance, of course, after queen d5 here, which defends c6, and it's interesting to compare what happens if bishop takes a6, bishop takes d4 as in the game. Anand had worked out another amazing line where he just gets a tiny advantage. It's very long. It starts with bishop takes b7, which exposes the king badly. And, well, Ivanchuk can still defend thanks to this move, amazingly. Defends a7, and if queen a8, he goes to c7, and it's not clear at all. The queen is under attack suddenly, and all the pieces are hanging. It's a real mess. But Anand had seen bishop takes c6, queen d1 check, which is the move that saves black. If not, that king is pretty much done. King g2, queen takes a4, and white plays rook takes a4. He's down and it's changed, but he has captured a couple of pawns, and he's also attacking the rook, and this bishop is also under attack. So apparently the best black can do is send this to an opposite color bishop endgame. After all these exchanges, rook d2, which is going to win one of these pawns eventually. King f3, stepping out of the pin. And now, well, it's more pleasant for white, definitely. He will remain up a pawn for some moves. But it has some drawish tendencies, apparently. But yeah, it was still pretty annoying for black. Even if he gets some pawn back, he will still have to dig deep to just save the game. But well, it's incredible how deep it was, the prep, especially considering that it was 1993. It's not like you could load the moves into Stockfish and just get the answer immediately or anything. And maybe, just maybe, I want to show you this. Maybe Anand got his inspiration from this game. I don't know. Maybe not, because in the line that that was played, this exchange sacrifice is possible. I'm sure Ivanchuk was more or less acquainted with the general idea, not at that stage and so direct probably. But I like to think that Anand maybe inspired himself on this wonderful game, which is Bondarevsky-Mikenas, which portrays a very similar idea. White seems to be under a lot of pressure. The rook on the open e-file. If we just castle, there's bishop takes h3, which seems to be very annoying. But White also has his trumps here. He has these advanced pawns. The king is castle on the queen side, and we have a wonderful bishop here. At any point, we could play queen a4 and come to the attack. But of course, we have to solve the problem of the king. But at the same time, we don't want to castle it. We already saw bishop takes h3, which takes out the pride of our position, that bishop on g2. So look at what White does. He plays bishop b2, leaving the king in the center, which looks absolutely insane. Especially because Black has this seemingly overpowering threat just taking on e2. But Bondarevsky was planning to give up the exchange in very similar fashion. He castled here, and after bishop takes e2, he goes queen a2. He's just ignoring everything. He's just ignoring the exchange. He gave up a pawn in the process. So of course Black takes, and White takes back, this time with the rook. The bishop turns out to be quite useful here. And believe it or not, Black is completely busted here. He's absolutely losing. His attack has stopped completely. I mean, our king is completely safe now, and White has some overpowering threats on the queen side. He's gonna play b5 and take the pawn a7, for example. And there's really not much that Black can do against this. If he played king b8, b5 comes anyway, and this pawn is doomed. Knight d8 was played, knight takes d4, and now we have all these pieces involved in the attack. We have the knight on d2 coming. Again, the principle of concentration forces in action. White solved his problems by giving up the exchange, and he knew that this gave him the opportunity of bringing the pieces quickly to the king side and just overpower his opponent there. Bishop c5 was playing the game, trying to get the bishop involved somehow, but it's definitely too late. Knight 2 to b3. If bishop b6, he just gets the bishop trapped. So he played bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, and this is totally crashing. Look at that. This is way too much to handle for anyone. No one can save Black in a situation like this. And the extra exchange is just an anecdote. It's doing nothing. So b6, c5, of course we're going to open lines if we can. Rook e7, c takes b, a takes b is out of the question. There's a checkmate on a8 supported by the bishop on g2. So c takes b6, and, well, you see the edge race there. The bishop is controlling a8, and we would love the queen there. So if the obstacle is the pawn on a7, we just deflect that pawn by taking on b6. And of course, now the game is almost over. Black is completely demolished on the queen side. The king gets out of its lair, and the rook is going to come with some check. And king d6. Rook d1 check, we're getting that queen. And not only the queen, we're also getting this pawn if Black takes with the rook. And if not, there's knight takes d7, queen c7 check, king e6. It's never gonna hide. Knight d4 check. Notice that Black still has 2 rooks for a queen. Doesn't seem so bad. Well, we have 2 pawns, 2 extra pawns for it, so we even have a material advantage here, but the problem is the king. Always. It's 2 exposed, we have all our pieces around, and now more material falls. If he moves the rook, he loses the knight. He still has the check, but after king h2, sorry, well, Black can barely move. He tried to defend the knight with rook d1, and then queen c2, very beautiful move, very subtle. Now there's no place for the rook to go, basically. It's just going to drop. For example, rook e1. I think we have, at the very least, queen d2, attacking these two at the same time. Rook e7 is out of the question because the knight is there. So yeah, he's dropping some material, and he can't really stay on the d file. There are no squares. d2, d3, d4, d5, d6 are all under control by the queen or the knight or the bishop. So it makes sense that he just resigns in this spot. But well, maybe he inspired on this. I'm sure he knew the game. Of course, it's a classic. Just wanted to show some this set-straight sample where white plays some similar idea. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like the content, please subscribe and leave a like. I will come up with more videos like this. Thanks a lot for watching.